Part 25.7, Surah Al-Furqan, the Criterion, Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Sufi Essence with Hammad Syed. We continue our illuminating, deep, and systematic exploration of Surah Al-Furqan, the Criterion, the decisive 25th chapter of the Holy Quran, which serves as the fundamental separator between truth and falsehood. Our preceding discussion brought us to the emotionally charged and spiritually profound moment of the Day of Judgment, where we heard the heart-wrenching, yet ultimately truthful, plea of the Messenger, peace be upon him, concerning his own people's tragic and inexcusable spiritual error, the active marginalization and abandonment of the Quran, the very criterion sent for their guidance. The narrative has navigated the most intense spiritual contrasts, establishing the absolute sovereignty of Allah and the agonizing consequences awaiting those who allow arrogance and bad companionship to lead them astray. Now, as we transition our focus to the majestic truth contained within verses 31 through 34, the surah pivots to a theme of profound and universal comfort, addressing the recurring and timeless subject of opposition to the truth and the divine, unwavering response to the relentless hostilities faced by all prophets and messengers throughout history, not just our beloved prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him. This segment is a wellspring of spiritual solace, strength, and unwavering assurance for every single believer, confirming that the prophet's struggle against the hostility and rejection of his people was not an isolated incident or a unique failure, but rather a universal, divinely ordained pattern that every proponent of truth must ultimately face. It assures the listener that Allah, the Sustainer, remains the supreme and ultimate protector, guide, and helper for those who hold fast to his message. The immediate historical context surrounding the revelation of these verses is crucially important for a deeper comprehension of their immense spiritual significance. These verses descended upon the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the small, persecuted community of early Muslims in Makkah during a period defined by extreme psychological and physical persecution. The Makkans did not confine their hostility merely to mocking the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his followers. They actively engaged in sophisticated political plotting, economic boycotts, and relentless personal harassment designed to extinguish the nascent light of Islam. These divine words serve a vital function. They immediately place the Prophet's profound suffering, a sense of isolation, and the opposition he endured within a larger, universally recognized, and divinely ordained framework. They validate his entire experience, assuring him, and by extension, every single believer who has ever struggled to uphold the truth, that their patient, unwavering endurance and spiritual fortitude are not in vain, but are perfectly recognized, eternally recorded, and immeasurably rewarded by the Almighty. Furthermore, the verses directly confront the Makkans' repeated, petty, and often insincere demands concerning the revelation of the Quran, confirming the immense underlying divine wisdom in the methodology of revealing the holy book gradually, over 2 decades. This deliberate, masterful structure, which is a hallmark of the Criterion itself, was specifically designed not only to facilitate the memorization and immediate application of the divine law, but, more importantly, to provide timely spiritual sustenance, precise legal and moral guidance, and the necessary psychological clarity and spiritual steadfastness the bot required to navigate the unceasing waves of hostility, doubt, and chaos. Allah's definitive authoritative response in this segment assures the believers that their spiritual and intellectual foundation is absolutely firm, and that divine justice and judgment against the determined, persistent enemies of the truth is absolutely certain and unavoidable. Let us now immerse ourselves in the profound comfort, the authoritative wisdom, and the eternal certainty contained within these majestic verses. Kanzel, Iman, Quran, Al-Furqan, the Criterion, 25 minutes and 31 seconds, verse 31. And likewise, we made for every prophet an enemy from among the criminals, and your Sustainer is sufficient as a guide and a helper. The 31st verse commences with a statement of a universal, foundational spiritual reality, delivering immediate, immense comfort, in crucial context to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the beleaguered early believers. And likewise, we made for every prophet an enemy from among the criminals. The crucial word likewise, wa-kadhalika, which can be translated as in the same way, immediately connects the Prophet's current suffering, his rejection, and the systematic hostility he faces directly to the timeless, established, and universal pattern observed in the missions of all previous divine envoys. This divine, inescapable pattern dictates that for every prophet culminates, without exception, there will invariably arise an enemy, a powerful, vocal adversary who actively resists the truth, and this opposition will be drawn explicitly from among the criminals. This absolute confirmation ensures that the Prophet's, peace be upon him, current experience of relentless opposition is not, in any way, a sign of failure or weakness in his message, but rather an essential structural component of the divine test. The mujrimin, whose lives are defined by spiritual crime, moral corruption, and a fundamental unwillingness to submit, are confirmed to be the inevitable, persistent adversaries of light, guidance, and spiritual order. The verse concludes with a magnificent, unconditional promise of ultimate divine assurance. And your sustainer is sufficient as a guide and a helper. The Prophet, peace be upon him, is reminded that his entire mission, his tireless efforts, and his necessary support are not contingent upon his own limited human strength, the fleeting loyalties of his tribe, or the sheer number of his followers, but upon the absolute, sufficient, and invincible power of his sustainer, Rab. Allah is declared to be absolutely sufficient as a guide, Haadiyya, the perfect source providing the moral compass, the intellectual clarity, and the certainty necessary to navigate and overcome the confusion and hostility of the enemy, as a helper, Naseera, the source providing the ultimate, unchallengeable, and invincible support against all forms of worldly and spiritual enemies. This profound affirmation of tawakkul, reliance on Allah, is the ultimate, inexhaustible source of strength for the Prophet, peace be upon him, and by extension for every single Muslim who has ever had to face persecution, scorn, or hostility, for humbly upholding the truth of the Criterion. Kanzela Man, Quran, Al-Furqan, the Criterion, 25-32, verse 32. And the disbelievers said, "Why was not the Quran sent down upon him all at once? This is how it is, so that we may strengthen your heart with it," and we recited it clearly in sequence. The 32nd verse revisits a specific, repetitive, and ultimately insincere objection continually raised by the Makkans, which simultaneously reveals the profound hidden divine wisdom behind the precise methodology of the revelation. And the disbelievers said, "Why was not the Quran sent down upon him all at once?" The disbelievers, al-Kafirun, in their spiritual arrogance, demanded that the entire corpus of the Quran be revealed in a single, instantaneous, overwhelming event, arguing that its gradual, 23-year nature somehow detracted from its presumed supernatural authenticity. This demand, however, was not rooted in a sincere intellectual pursuit of the truth, but rather in a cynical attempt to discredit the Prophet, peace be upon him, by holding his divine text to a human standard of expediency. Allah provides the definitive, profound, and spiritually beautiful explanation. This is how it is, so that we may strengthen your heart with it. The gradual piecemeal and timely revelation was not a limitation, but a deliberate, highly sophisticated, and divinely designed strategy. Its primary purpose transcended mere logistics and was fundamentally spiritual, to strengthen the Prophet's heart. Each individual revelation, arriving precisely at the moment it was most needed, whether amid vicious persecution, in response to complex doctrinal or legal questions, or during moments of human vulnerability and doubt, provided an immediate divine affirmation, moral clarity, and an unshakable, continuous spiritual steadfastness, thabat. Furthermore, the verse notes, and we recited it clearly in sequence. The term tartil refers to the measured, distinct, clear, beautifully rhythmic, and perfectly sequential recitation and arrangement of the verses. This perfect, gradual arrangement served to solidify the Prophet's, peace be upon him, conviction, to embed the principles deep within the hearts of the early community, and to make the powerful message both easily digestible, intellectually compelling, and deeply persuasive for every single listener. Kanzel Aman Quran, Al-Furqan, the Criterion, 25-33. Verse 33. And they do not bring to you any question, but we bring you the truth, and the best explanation. The 33rd verse addresses the constant, relentless barrage of challenging questions, hostile accusations, and intellectual traps hurled at the Prophet, peace be upon him, by his opponents, providing complete and absolute reassurance of the divine preparedness. And they do not bring to you any question, but we bring you the truth and the best explanation. The questions, methal, or philosophical challenges brought forth by the Makkans were specifically designed to test, trick, expose, or embarrass the Prophet, peace be upon him, ranging from obscure historical queries about past nations to insolent demands for spectacular physical miracles. Allah, the Omniscient and All-Wise, assures the Messenger, peace be upon him, that for every single challenge, objection, or philosophical conundrum raised by the opponents across all domains of knowledge, the divine response is immediate, complete, and demonstrably superior. Allah provides the truth al-haq, the definitive, unwavering, and factually absolute answer, and the best explanation, asana, tafsira, the most eloquent, persuasive, logically comprehensive, and spiritually penetrating exposition. This divine assurance confirms the Quran's absolute intellectual supremacy, its complete sufficiency, and its unparalleled capacity to definitively address every issue raised across all dimensions of human life, thought, and spiritual experience. This assurance elevates the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his message far above the level of petty worldly squabbles, confirming that he speaks not from his own limited human knowledge, but with the absolute unchallengeable authority of the Creator of the heavens and the earth. Kanzul Aman, Quran, Al-Furqan, the Criterion, 25-34, verse 34. Those who will be gathered upon their faces towards hell. They are in the worst place and are the most astray from the path. The final verse of this segment serves as a powerful, decisive, and terrifying conclusion to the sustained discussion of the disbelievers' persistent opposition, returning the narrative to their ultimate, inescapable, and humiliating destiny. Those who will be gathered upon their faces towards hell. This horrifying, visceral image depicts the extreme humiliation, the absolute degradation, and the sheer, paralyzing terror of the condemned on the day of judgment. Being gathered upon their faces is understood both as a metaphorical expression of utter helplessness, spiritual disgrace, and complete loss of dignity, and as a literal reality of the hereafter, as confirmed by the Prophet, peace be upon him, himself. This is the fate reserved for those whose spiritual path on earth was defined by consciously turning their backs on the clear truth and the divine guidance. The inevitable spiritual consequence is then stated with finality. They are in the worst place and are the most astray from the path. The worst place, Sharu Makana, is unequivocally the hellfire, the antithesis of the Garden of Eternity. Furthermore, they are pronounced to be the most astray from the path at Alusabila. This is the final comprehensive spiritual judgment. Their persistent, conscious rejection of the Criterion and their refusal to follow the clear, luminous path of the Messenger, peace be upon him, define them as those who wandered the farthest and deepest into spiritual darkness, having deliberately exchanged certainty for doubt and guidance for confusion. This stark conclusion contrasts sharply with the earlier verses, which affirmed Allah's complete guidance and eternal help for those who humbly chose the luminous path of light. These verses provide immense spiritual comfort to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and all believers, assuring them that opposition is an established universal spiritual test for all prophets, and that Allah is the sufficient guide and helper. This deep assurance is built upon the foundation of reliance on Allah, Tawakkul, the very internal spiritual attitude necessary to face the hostility, challenges, and tribulations of the world with peace. Hadith, narrated by Umar ibn al-Khattab, may Allah be pleased with him. The Prophet, peace be upon him, taught, if you were to rely on Allah with true reliance, He would provide for you just as He provides for the birds. They leave their nests hungry in the morning and return full in the evening. Sunan at-Tirmidhi, Hadith number 2344. This beautiful, deeply comforting, profoundly practical Hadith perfectly encapsulates the fundamental spiritual attitude of unwavering reliance on Allah. That is the essence of finding Him to be a sufficient guide and helper. Haadiyya wa Naseera was so majestically promised in verse 31. The Prophet, peace be upon him, taught that if a believer were to practice true reliance, tawakkul, a complete, tranquil surrender of the result to Allah, after exerting the best effort upon Allah, their sustenance, security, and spiritual support would be divinely guaranteed, just as it is for the birds. The birds put forth the necessary, diligent effort. They leave their nests hungry in the morning in search of food, but their hearts are fundamentally reliant on Allah's provision, and they return full in the evening. This powerful natural metaphor teaches the believer a vital lesson. In the face of the hostility of the mujramin and the inevitable struggles of this transient life, they must exert their best effort kaziyab, while maintaining absolute, tranquil, and non-anxious trust in Allah's final provision, tawakkul. This perfect spiritual balance of effort and tawakkul is the exact kind of internal, spiritual strength that ultimately strengthens the heart, Linuthabbita bihi Fu-aada-ka, making the divine guidance the only true, unshakable source of security and certainty. Let us now supplicate, drawing from the profound lessons of these verses, asking Allah to grant us a deeper understanding and to guide our every step. Dua, O Allah, Ar-Rahman, and Ar-Rahim. Grant us the unwavering fortitude and deep spiritual insight to accept that hostility and opposition from Thee. Criminals is the eternal, necessary pattern for all who follow the divine light of truth. And let us always find You to be absolutely sufficient as a guide and a helper, Haadiyya wa Naseera. Strengthen our fragile hearts with the timeless light of the criterion that You revealed in clear sequence, so that we may never, for a single moment, waver in the face of philosophical doubt, insidious trickery, or insincere questions. Preserve us, by Your infinite and universal mercy, from the profound humiliation and the devastating disgrace of being gathered upon our faces, and from being tragically counted among those who are eternally most astray from the path. Let our destiny, O Sustainer, be the peaceful, guided, and joyous return to Your presence, illuminated only by the pure, unadulterated light of the Quran. May Allah illuminate your heart and mind with the light of this divine ill. May He make your channel a beacon of guidance for all who seek spiritual clarity and truth. May your efforts be a source of immense reward, and may you be granted the highest stations of paradise. May the peace and blessings of Allah always be upon you and your loved ones. May He grant you unwavering steadfastness on the path of truth, and may your work be a testament to His magnificent names, Ar-Rahman and Ar-Rahim. Ameen.